and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eleanor and today I want to do my July reading wrap up. But before we get started, I want to have a quick chat with you. Recently, my friend David over at David's Book Reviews, I'll leave his channel linked down below, gave my channel a shout out, and he mentioned that he didn't know how to say the second part of my YouTube name. So I thought I would tell you how to say it. It's actually Scottish Gaelic, and how you say it is Nich Vater. And so that's what my channel name is, Eleanor Nich Vater. And these words are never said, how you assume. I have been learning the Scottish Gaelic for the last year. Ha Beckham Gaelic Acum. I have a little bit of Gaelic because I've been learning for the last year. And yeah, so that's the reason why that's my channel name. So first I want to say that I read a lot of books in July and I'm really pleased with that. My reading has been quite slow recently, which has frustrated me because there's so many books I want to read, but I've been struggling to find what genre I'm really into at the moment. And although I'm a huge lover of fantasy, I think what my true passion is science fiction. So I've just embraced the science fiction this last month and I've read quite a few books. So the first book I read was Secret Vampire by L.J. Smith. This was a continuation of my Reliving My Teen Vampire Obsession series. I'll leave that linked down below, where I reread vampire books I read as a teenager that started my obsession with the supernatural. So this first book, this is a compendium, so this is 3 novels in one, so the first book's only a couple of hundred pages. I read that in one sitting and I talked about how I felt the story. So I won't say too much because that video goes into greater detail, but it's about a teenager who gets diagnosed with a terminal illness and her best friend is a vampire that she didn't know about, and he goes about trying to turn her into a vampire. And it's romance. This series is heavily romance and it's about soulmates and things like that, and about this young woman who becomes a vampire, Poppy, and about her experiencing being a vampire. It's a very short book though. The next book I read was The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett. This is the first book in the Tiffany Aching series, in Terry Pratchett's wider Discworld world. He has written many a book, and I would eventually like to read all the Discworld novels, but I'm not reading them in order of publication. I'm just reading the grouped together series that I think I would enjoy the most. So that's why I read The Wee Free Men. This is such a fun story. I actually listened to it on audiobook. I borrowed it from my library, and Tiffany's just such a fantastic character. It's more of a younger aged book, and you meet the Knack Mac Fico, aka the Wee Free Men, which are like little small borrower sized people in the Terry Pratchett world, and it is poking fun at Scottish people but in such a fun way. I absolutely loved it, especially listening to an audiobook because the narrator put on a Scottish accent for them. They had bagpipes and they wore kilts and they were saying "och guy" all the time, and a lot of people might find offence with that, but it's Terry Pratchett. I had great fun. It was so much fun. So I'm going to want to continue on reading the Tiffany Aching arc of Discworld because they're just fun. Terry Pratchett's not to be taken too seriously. He writes about very serious topics, but in such a light-hearted and fun way, and his Discworld is so complicated and so well written. I would definitely recommend. The next book I read was YearOne by Nora Roberts. This is the first in a trilogy, I believe, although she's still writing them, so maybe it wouldn't be a trilogy. First in the series, and it is about a pandemic. I was hesitant to pick this up because we're still currently going through a worldwide pandemic, but it didn't bother me to read it, but I would caution you if you're sensitive to things like that. In this world, a pandemic hits and kills like a third of the world's population, so that's like 2 billion people die. And as with all Nora Roberts, there's huge fantastical and supernatural elements. So those who survive this huge sweeping pandemic, a lot of them develop magic, or they become like fae and like magical creatures and things like that, and the world left over is magical. So it's the good versus evil fight. It is a kind of chosen one trope, although it's not as heavily implied in this first one. because as the title suggests, this is only year one of this pandemic. But I love this. This is everything that I greatly enjoy. It is kind of dystopian and magical, and there is some romance, as Nora Roberts' books tend to be, but I had great fun reading this, and I've currently just started the second book in this trilogy, and I'm really enjoying it. The next book I read was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Again, I did a review about this book, and I'll leave that linked below if you're wanting more information. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy, and it is following President Snow as he's like a teenager into a young man, and it's about the 10th Hunger Games and all the changes that President Snow brings as a young man. If you watch my review, you'll know that I was greatly disappointed by this. This isn't what I was looking for. I don't think it was greatly executed, and I don't really see the point in the story. Nothing of substance happened, and I don't feel like I learnt an awful lot about how Panem as a whole is. I was expecting from a prequel you get more history, you get more in-depth knowledge, and you did get little bits here and there, but I think she tried too hard to link this to the original Hunger Games in a really obvious way, and I don't think it was necessary, and let me know what you thought of the Hunger Games prequel, this book, and if you've read it. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. The next book I read was Dark Prince by Christine Feehan. This is another book of my Reliving My Teen Vampire Obsession series. I haven't posted that video yet, so maybe this is a little hint of what's to come. This is the first book in a really, really long series. This first book was published in 1999, and book 30 is coming out this year. It's about vampires. They live in the Carpathian Mountains. It's about soulmates, and it's just a very long romance series with supernatural elements woven into it. I had a lot of problems with this series, reading it again and realising that I don't like it quite as much. But you'll need to wait and watch that video to know more. Next book I read was Here We Are, Notes for Living on Planet Earth by Oliver Jeffers. I borrowed this from my library on audiobook, and I didn't realise that it was a children's story and that the audiobook was only like 8 minutes long. It must be a picture book, so I wasn't quite expecting this to be such a short read. But it was good, it was fun, and I just liked the message of this Oliver Jeffers writing this for his son and the bond that they obviously share. It's about his hopes and wishes for his child growing up on Earth. So it's a sweet wee story, but one I wouldn't have picked up normally, but I obviously didn't do enough research before I downloaded the audiobook and listened to it. The next book I read was The City and the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke. The only other Arthur C. Clarke book I read is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I really, really loved, and I want to continue reading more of that series, because I believe he did publish subsequent books for 2001. But I saw this and I was so intrigued by the premise. It's the last of humanity living on Earth in the last city, and it's millions and millions and millions of years in the future. It is so mind-blowing how expansive this book is and how wide the history expands. You're following a young man who is born into this world, and it's him as he's reaching adulthood and he's learning more about this city and how it functions and about why he's different, possibly. And it's just very, very clever and very intricate, and the way humanity has evolved and changed and transformed and now live in this last city on Earth is really fascinating. I just find it so complex and so interesting, and it raises like a lot of questions about humanity and where we're heading in terms of like technology and forgetting our history and things like that. So I found it just a really interesting concept to ponder, and this is brilliant classic sci-fi. I would highly recommend it. It's part of the science fiction masterworks collection for a reason, and I would highly recommend anyone who likes reading classic sci-fi to definitely give this a go. I didn't find the language too complicated. I know with science fiction, and especially older science fiction books, the language can make it harder for people to engage and to understand what's going on. but I found that the angle this book took and the character you're following, it makes everything quite clear and everything's very well described and explained as you go through with this character. And I really liked the whole arc and where this story went. I just thought it was very brilliantly executed. And then the last book I read was Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. I've only read one Ray Bradbury before, and it was The Illustrated Man, which is a short story collection, which I loved. I just thought it was really, really, really clever. There was many stories in that collection that I thought was fantastic. So that's made me want to pick up some other work by Ray Bradbury. So I picked Something Wicked with This Way Comes because I found it on audiobook from my library and I really enjoyed it. It's about two young boys who are 13, who one is really eager to grow up and the other very much wants to stay as a young teen running about his town and having fun. And it's about one of the young boys' dads struggling with the fact that he's quite an older father. His kid's only 13, but he's in his 50s and he's just struggling with feeling too old and that he can't keep up with his son. So that's the overall point of the story, but it is a bit creepy and a bit dark. It is classed as horror on Sci-Fi. I wouldn't say it's horror, but maybe I'm out of touch for what classes as horror or not. And it's surrounding this carnival that comes to town and has very many weird and creepy acts, and there's something odd going on and something dangerous, and the boys will be boys and they go and investigate and bad things happen. I just thought it was really well done. I enjoyed the audiobook and I feel like that enhanced my reading of this because of the language used. Maybe I wouldn't have focused as much reading it, but hearing the story told and the mystical stuff surrounding the carnival was just really interesting. So yeah, I read 8 books this month, although clearly a few of them I started before July and I just only finished them in July, but I feel like that's an improvement, reading 8 books. I've made a good dent on my reading challenge this month, which I'm very grateful for. And lastly, as always, I show you my bullet journal, which I do for my reading. So it shows you the pages that I read on what day, the books I read, and what I rated them. And I just like this because it keeps me accountable. It's nothing overly fancy. I just like filling it out and knowing that I've made the effort to try and read every day. Some days I'm not able to read as much because I've been working long shifts at work and I read during my lunch break, so I'm only able to read a little bit. But yeah, I feel like this keeps me in check with my reading. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it wasn't too long. I kind of rambled on a wee bit there. I'll leave all the videos that I mentioned down below in the description and please check them out. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I'd love to have a chat with you about them and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!